Hey everybody, Tim Anderson here, aka Renfail. I am joined by the lovely.
Lovely. Uh, this is
Oh,
Jesse,
he's lovely.
aka Scribbles from over at Defend the Night, and just here to talk about MMORPGs.
I'm Leksur, lead designer of Defend the Night, and I'm not going to tell you my real name because even my family calls me Lek.
Well, welcome to today's episode, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about I don't necessarily think it's a controversial topic, but it is a topic that generates a lot of discussion, a lot of heated discussions. There's no right way or wrong way, but there are things that we can look at in the topic of this discussion. We're going to be talking about monetization today. More than likely, we'll be spreading beyond only MMORPGs and talking about monetization across a variety of games. But the central focal point is about monetization in MMORPGs and how that has kind of spread out and affected other industries. Um, I think these days we started off in the kind of early to mid 90s with the pay per minute, pay per hour type subscription before the multiplayer game was a huge thing. And then by the late 90s, we'd gotten into the Ultima Online and Everquest era where it was all about the monthly subscription. And then that rode for about 10 years before people started looking at microtransactions and were influenced by the real market, the RMT that was going on, that for a long time was considered bad, but yet companies started realizing, oh my God, this is a billion-dollar industry. We need to tap into this because other people are doing it, whether we tell them not to or not, regardless of how we punish them, it's still happening. We need to try to tap into that market. And so we saw, like Sony Marketplace, I think was like one of the first ones that did it, where EverQuest 2, I believe it was, introduced that market where you could buy and sell items in the market. And then the next thing you knew, we had games going free to play with cash shops and microtransactions. And that kind of, I feel like that all kind of peaked around the time that Battlefront 2 came out 3 or 4 years ago now. And there was a huge outcry about, oh, it's a horrible thing, all your loot boxes and all this other stuff. And then the industry, to some degree, has taken a little bit of an about face. And now we're starting to transition back into single player games that don't necessarily have a live component with microtransaction. But there's so much gray area in here, not to mention the fact that games these days aren't only influenced by other games, but they're also influenced by all of these subscription services that people have, whether it's Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Xbox Live, PlayStation Plus. Ah, everywhere you turn, there's a subscription that includes a lot for what you're paying. But for some people, what point is too much? How much what's your minimum buy-in? I think Anson Mount, I believe is his name. He's an actor. He did Hell on Wheels. He did most recent couple seasons ago. He was on Star Trek Discovery as Captain Pike. He's a really interesting actor, but even he was like on Facebook. I remember a few months back ranting about, I've got like 6 subscriptions and now this other streaming service is coming out and they want me to subscribe. He's like, enough, guys. Enough is enough. Like, I'm already, I just can't keep going. So lots of monetization topics here. That's kind of the introduction. I'll shut up and let you guys talk for a little bit, and let's just have a conversation about money making in MMORPGs, good, bad, and the ugly.
So I guess I'll go first. Do you guys remember shareware back in
Yes,
I don't know back in what was that?
early mid 90s.
It was early, maybe even 80s. I'm not sure, but what they would do is they would have a company that would store a bunch of games, and then it'd send you a disc, and then you would try the product or the games for a certain period of time, and then they would ask you to buy it. So eh, I think it's a predecessor from that, trying to get the games out to people. And there, so we have things like free to play that kind of mimics that. You get a taste of the game, um, and then they throw things at you like convenience items, so you can continue to play the game uh, under certain conveniences. I wish, just personally, that we could just get back to, you know, back to box prices and maybe even subscription like Netflix. But the thing is it's whatever the gamer will pay for. And what we really need to concentrate is just how the gamer's spending his money on those items. What do you guys think?
There's an
Yeah.
interesting. Sorry, Lexer. I'm gonna say one
Oh,
thing really quick, and
go for
then
it.
because I remember one of the times I went into the offices at Shroud of the Avatar, when they still had their physical offices in Austin, and I sat down and talked to Star Long, and I had this similar conversation with Matt Fuhrer at the Austin Game Conference, the guy who runs ESO or ZeniMax. I forget which thing he runs there. I think it's ESO. Anyway, but with two industry veterans, and both of them told me basically the same thing, which was it doesn't really matter how you monetize your game. The people who like your game are gonna pay for it regardless of how you monetize it. It just is up to what you and your company want to do and what model works for you the most. However, from an outsider's perspective, there's a lot of people who like and dislike certain things. Sorry, Alexa, I
Oh,
had to
no
jump in
worries.
and say that real quick.
No, I was going to say I agree that it is kind of a natural progression of things. But one thing that I've noticed over the years is, especially with the gaming industry, they like to jump on trends,
Hmm.
and then they will run it into the ground to the point where it will implode to whatever effect. I mean, when subscriptions first came out, people realized, hey, instead of just selling the game, we can get a steady income. So almost everybody had a subscription for anything, even if it was just like a minor thing online subscription. And then all of a sudden, people start saying, well, I don't want to have to pay $100 a month just so I can play these 3 or 4 games. So they just stopped getting them. And then that started dying out. And then people started moving to the cash shops and the microtransactions. And now we've hit that point where that's imploded because so many people do it that we're just sick of it. And with so many people jumping on these trends, there's going to be very few people who do it by what we would consider right, or at least a way that is more beneficial to their their fans rather than to themselves, which is usually what causes that implosion. Because if we look at free to play, how many have done it in a way that has been both beneficial to the company and very good for the player? I can only think of maybe 1 or 2, but there's hundreds of games out there that do it. So that's caused that particular system to collapse. And I think the next one we're going to end up seeing is NFTs. And it's going to happen in the same progression. Everyone's going to do it. And eventually people are going to start doing, things that are more about the studio rather than the people or the game or the industry. And then we're going to see that implode going and eventually transitioning to the next big thing.
There's an interesting thing. I don't know if either one of you do this. So I have a Netflix subscription, and I also have a PlayStation Plus subscription. I do not have two consoles. I only have the one console. I've got the PS4. I still haven't upgraded the PS5 because they're going to continue to push out PS4 games for the rest of this calendar year. I'll wait. It depends. I'll wait until the resellers stop trying to do their stupid resell crap before I worry about buying a PS5. But what's interesting to me is, so for the PS4 with PS Plus, it's like I don't even know, like $6 or $7 a month because I pay for it annually. So it's a very low cost for me. There's a few things I like about it. First, at the minimum, I get 2 free games every single month. Now, they might not always be games that I want to play, but I'd say 70 to 80% of them are games that I will play. There are a few where I just download it and chuck it into the library and I never touch it again. But there's been a lot of games that have come out where, like Last of Us 1, I got that through PS Plus. I mean, there's been some really good games. Also, Freak, I can't remember. It's like a very interesting. It doesn't matter anymore. Anyway, you get 2 free games every month. That's the first thing I like about it. Second, you get deep discounts in the PlayStation Store on all these other games. And um, those two things alone, I think, make it worth it to me to have that subscription because I play the PlayStation 4 a lot. I mean, I'm on that thing probably, I'm going to say
You, you
conservatively,
just you just stepped on a very key phrase though. It's worth it to you,
yes, yes,
and everybody's going to be different.
yes. This is a very, very important point because Netflix is also worth it to me because And it's not just for me, it's mostly for my wife because I only watch Netflix. She uses Netflix infinitely more than I do. I mean, we'll watch things together a couple times a week, but she'll watch stuff almost every single day. Most of it is for her to improve her English. So she'll watch documentaries and other things so that she can continue to improve upon her English. So for us, it was an entertainment source, but also a tool for her to use for language skills. But obviously, you do get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But then I've got friends who are like, I won't pay for Netflix. There's no way I'll pay for Netflix. It's not worth it to me. And I'm like, I look at it and go, you're getting hundreds of movies and shows and everything else for I think whatever tier I'm on is like the second or third tier. It's like 17 or $18 a month so that we can have it on multiple devices and stuff. And I know other people have families and do everything else. But I have those two subscriptions. Plus I pay for Lord of the Rings Online as a subscription. So I've got 3, and then I have Photoshop, that's another subscription. So I'm already at 4 subscriptions that I pay for every single month. And I was thinking the other day, I was like, whenever I get around to updating to the next console version, I'm going to go ahead and get both consoles. I'm going to get an Xbox Series X and a PlayStation 5. And I already know in advance that the moment I get the Xbox, I'm going to subscribe to Xbox Live because there's, for me, the inherent value of getting access to all of these games and everything else. But here's the caveat to all this. I have these subscriptions. I won't also subscribe to, say, whatever EA has now. EA Play, I think it used to be Origins, and I think now it's EA Play or something like that. And
I just
then,
call it garbage.
yeah, everybody's got their own version
Something.
of it.
It's
Yeah.
like Rockstar, how now they have their own launcher and stuff, but it's pointless. It's like, why? I mean, I know this isn't exactly on point with the conversation, but it still holds with a lot of streaming services where it's like, okay, Rockstar has what games they have are really good games. And they just say, let's do our own launcher. Okay, so you're offering 3 or 4 games on a launcher.
That sounds like CBS All Access because when it first started, it
Right,
was
exactly.
only Star Trek.
Why? What the hell is the point? Because I would much rather it be on Steam or Epic or whatever is your digital distribution platform of choice. Because there's so many more options there. I think having Rockstar installed just so I can play GTA 5 is beyond ridiculous. Because it's pointless. It really, really is pointless.
So
And I feel the same way with like every single television station out there that has their own streaming service now. Why?
especially if there's
Because
only one show that you like.
exactly, and that's another good point where on every one of these services, there's only, for me, maybe one show that I like, and I'm not paying $15 a month to watch a single show.
Well, it's the new channel right now. That's how they're doing it. Because you used to go on cable and get your
Yeah.
channels.
A
They don't have that
package.
anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, they just have to do something. So that's what they're doing right
There's an interesting correlation here, I think, because I do play for Lord of the Rings Online. The only reason I pay for that game, as opposed to playing it free to play, and by the way, I may be dropping my subscription because my brother's schedule has changed, and now that he's out of winter, he's got stuff to do with his son. They've got t-ball and soccer, and so going down to only playing a couple days a week because I own all of the content. I don't necessarily need all the VIP perks if I'm only playing twice a week, so I'll probably let it go back into free to play and just play it a couple times. But the reason I've always played that game VIP over the years is because when I play that game, I do play that game. I'll put in 15 hours a week more or less. And at that point, I feel like it's justified for me spending the subscription amount when I'm actually playing it. Like anytime I sit down, I'm playing it for 2 to 3 hours, and I'm doing that 4 or 5 times a week. So when I hit that level, then I'm happy to pay for a subscription because I feel like I'm getting enough out of it to get to that subscription. But here's the problem I have on a personal level with all of these games wanting to have subscription options. And I say this knowing full well that I just spent the last 6.5 years as the creative director on the Saga Lucemia preaching about how that game was going to be a subscription only, no cash shop. So I understand how this is going to sound. Um, Games need to have options for people because, and this is why I started to talk about a couple years ago, I was thinking about doing a hybrid option with Saga, where it was like, here's the option for the people who might only want to play 5 or 10 hours a week, and then here's the option for the people who want to play 20 hours a week or 40 hours a week. Or I think it's good to have lots of options for those people, because the problem that I have with all of these games that have subscriptions, I don't want to play all these games. I pick a game, or maybe I pick 3 games, and I'm playing them at one point in time. It's like, it's the Netflix thing. Like, I don't also have a subscription to Hulu and Amazon because I get enough entertainment out of Netflix. I don't also need to have whatever it is now. Is it Peacock is the new one? It's no longer CBS Access. I
Yeah.
think it's Peacock now. It's like Peacock and Netflix and Hulu and all this other stuff. There's just so many options now. It's like, it's crazy.
Competition's gonna
Well,
get stiff.
Yeah, it's only going to get fiercer. Yeah.
I got a good friend of mine who's basically he went back to school and became a psychiatrist. No, I didn't drive him to it, but we sat down. We had a long conversation about the gaming industry, and he basically told me because we were talking about how there's so many options now that no one can really make a choice, a very good choice.
Hmm.
And he was like, that's textbook. What was he? What do you call it? Choice overload, I think it was called, where you just have so many options, you're paralyzed by it, and that's where we are.
Choice
Like
paralysis. That's a good way to look at it.
yeah, with streaming, there's so many options, you can't afford them all, so you just don't know what to choose. So what we're going to end up seeing is a lot of people, just like with we've seen with MMOs, you're going to jump your subscription because you can only afford or willing to afford so many. And
Or
then
time constraints too. Yeah.
or time constraints. Like personally, I'm not a big fan of the subscription model right now in my life. I was a big supporter of it, but I'm not now because my schedule is just very volatile. I can go from I have literally nothing to do. Let's go outside, climb on the roof, and clean some windows. To I wake up at 5 a.m. and I don't go to bed till 2 in the morning, and I don't even realize my wife has come home because I'm just working and working and working. So a subscription to me isn't even worth it. Now, if they were to offer, say, you can pay, $15 and you get X number of hours of playtime, I would still probably do that. I'd buy that whenever it runs out because that way I'm guaranteed to always have this much playtime.
That's a very
Whereas
interesting.
with a monthly subscription, you're saying you have up to 30 days worth of hours on average of playtime. How much you utilize is up to you. So because my utilization has dropped down, I don't do it, period. And that company gets nothing from me.
So I do prepaid, and I've been doing prepaid on my phone for the whole time I've been in Mexico, which is since 2010. So I've been on prepaid for like 11 years now. So here's what I get for my prepaid. I spend about $15 a month. I get unlimited. Just think about this for a minute. Unlimited calls, texts, and social media data anywhere in Mexico, the United States, or Canada. All right. Unlimited phone, texts, and social media data. And then beyond that, I get 4 gigs of like non-social media, like if I'm not on Wi-Fi and I'm at the airport and I'm on, I'm watching a YouTube video, that's considered data usage because I'm not on Facebook or I'm not on Twitter or I'm not using WhatsApp or whatever, Instagram.
Right.
But because I don't use the phone and I'm in the house all the time, and so I'm on Wi-Fi like 95% of the time, the prepaid option for me to have that phone is great because literally the only time I make calls on that phone is either to talk to a lawyer or an accountant or family members. And most of the time, family members are done through WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger calls, like video calls. So it's really mostly about the accountant, the banker, lawyer, business related phone calls that I have to make back to the United States to do that stuff. And then my wife uses it to call her family because she talks to them 2 or 3 times a week and she'll be on the phone for like 4 hours. But I like that prepaid option. When you were just talking about it, I was like, that's just how I use my phone because I literally only ever need to use the phone when I'm calling the United States or when my wife needs to call the family. I don't need to have a plan that offers me
Right.
20 gigs of
And
data and it
and
costs $90 a month.
this
Fuck that.
this
No.
this isn't the first time I've ever brought it up either. But my usual justification for it is, I would be playing a lot of different games right now if that were an option. And what would companies rather get? A little bit of money from me or nothing?
Mm.
Because I I know there's a lot of people that are like me too. Because everyone of my generation who grew up playing EverQuest and WoW and all this stuff, times change. Now you've got families. Now you've got a couple promotions at work, or maybe you moved somewhere and took up a new profession, and we just don't have the time that we used to have. I mean, if someone were to tell me, "Hey, you want to go do another 72-hour raid?" I'd be like, "Do I want to?" Yes, because that was crazy fun. Can I? Hell no. No
I
way.
don't think I would want to. I think those days are behind me.
Oh, it was fun.
It was fun. It was definitely fun. I don't think I want to do that anymore. I get cranky after if I'm here in this chair for more than like 4 hours. I'm like, I need a fucking break. Like, I need to get up, go for a run, do some push-ups, jumping jacks, something to like get the blood flowing and like rest my eyes for a little bit.
Yeah.
Those long sessions are over for me. I mean, I like 6 hours is the max I could ever do, uh, and it's just not going to be something I want to do. Let me ask you guys a question though. Do you think that the free to play model is something that can kind of transcend both of those items? Because I know that you said you don't want to pay for another subscription, but you can get in there every now and then and check the game out, get your feet wet, and then you know pay if you respect the game or want the game to continue
I
or having fun. So what do you guys think of that?
From a personal level, and I've mentioned this somewhere, previous episodes or something. I I don't think there's anything wrong with a company offering free to play as a trial type of environment. But when we're talking about MMORPGs, it's very important to understand the necessity of the company to generate an income to keep the servers running, to keep developers working, to keep people operating the live service of the game as well as working in the background on whatever is the next content expansion or live, content updates. So there has to be some type of money coming in. And the thing that I don't like about the purely, and I'm speaking from a developer's perspective right now. So my developer hat is on, not my gamer hat. I've always looked at it and said nothing wrong with having a trial version for players to run around in and play 20, 30 hours. And because when you're talking about MMORPG, you're not talking about a single player experience where the player is going to play it for 60 hours and then they're done with it. You're talking about a game where hopefully you're going to hook that player in and that player is going to be playing hundreds, if not thousands of hours. So, and I don't want to get into the data of like lifetime value of customers and how much the average MMORPG player spends on a game. That's not necessarily, it is relevant, but not entirely relevant because you can get that money from people in a variety of ways. But knowing that you have to have money coming in for servers, legal, logistics, employees, insurance, salaries, development costs, live service costs, customer service reps, and all this other stuff, there has to be something coming in. So the purely the purely free to play option isn't sustainable in that sense for a game as a live service because you have to be generating income. So if you do a free to play version, you have to have a cash shop. Like there has to be a way to monetize that. Then the problem with the cash shop that I have is a cash shop is always going to be a, you're fishing at that point, and it's going to be based on data. It's like, what do the fish like to eat? Do they like this bait or that bait? What time of day do they bite? And people view that as manipulative, but it's not manipulative. It's just smart business. It's data, it's analytics, it's knowing what certain players want because those are the ones who are going to feed you and keep your game operating. So it makes sense from a developer standpoint that you're going to do things and put monetization into your free to play game that generates the most amount of income to keep the game going and keep people paid. And that's a dangerous line to walk because I know you want to rant about loot boxes and all. I totally agree with the loot box scenario, but I the problem with that free to play model is you're relying on a small percentage, and it's a very small percentage, of players to actually monetize and to keep your game going. The vast majority of people, given the opportunity, are not going to pay shit. They're not, because they're like, why should I? It's free. Why would I give you money if you're going to give it to me for free? So I think there's companies you can look at. I kind of Not everyone's going to agree with me. I think that the World of Warcraft option that they offer now is interesting because you can log into the game and you can just play all of the content. Like, you don't have to buy an expansion pack, you don't have to buy any bundles. You just pay like whatever it is, $10 or $15 a month, and you get access to everything up to the most recent expansion. So you've got 14 years of content that you can play through for a very low monthly fee. And then, of course, they have the optional stuff that you can go into. And then on the flip side of that, you have like Lord of the Rings Online, which is controversial for some people. They lock a lot of things behind the cash shop. Some of it is done in a way that I feel is a little eh. Some of it is brilliant. Here's an example: base housing. So we're talking, you can get housing in the Hobbit area, human area, and Elven areas, like in the Dwarven area. So all of the starting races, you can get that basic housing, free to play. You can access it. Doesn't cost any Lotro points. It just costs in-game currency. You can earn that through quests and killing and so on and so forth. But when you get to Rohan and you get to Gondor, they have what's known as premium housing. Premium housing costs this special type of currency called mithril coins and or premium housing writs. Those can only be purchased with Lotro coins. And the only way you can get Lotro coins is by either grinding them in the game or paying real life currency. And I think that that's a brilliant kind of balance where they've given a bunch of options to the free to play players, but then if you want the really cool stuff, it's real life currency. And so they've bridged that gap of having options available for the free to play people to still be able to have a house and feel like and that, for most important, is you keep people playing the game. And the more people you have playing the game, the higher the percentage that that person is going to click on something and buy something, whether it's a discount or a holiday item or a spring festival or something else. So you always are trying to figure out, how do I get the most amount of people playing the game, because it's a percentage game. Remember, it's a small percentage of people who pay for the game, but the more people you have playing the game, the more people fit into that small percentile bracket and are
Right.
willing to pay for something.
Well, it's like with free to play with an MMO. I always tell people and especially this era, it's a good idea because no one wants to spend $60 in the game and $15 for a month just to see if you like it. It's ridiculous. But MMOs rely on the world being populated.
Yes.
MMO with no players is a dead MMO. It doesn't matter if you love it to death. If there's no one to play with, you won't be there. It's just the fact of the matter. So it's a good option to allow the world to still seem very popular because Lotro is a very old game at this point. There's still lots of people playing it. Yeah, most of them are free players, but let's say I wanted to join and I wanted to pay because I want all the fancy bells and whistles. Because I get in and I see there's lots of people. That, in the back of my mind, tells me that if there's so many people here, there's going to be people down the road. So I will always have options of people to play with because most MMOs have group content near the end for the majority of things. So to me, that's a very good thing. Right there, free to play is kind of in a way earned its own. There are a lot of people who have done it in a very predatory manner that have gone against the game's design. For instance, Everquest. Retail Everquest, it's all about the social aspect of grouping. It's not about the high action, even though there are times where you've puckered. It's all about finding a camp, having a good time, hanging out with some good people. But with their cash shop, you can literally buy things to remove that aspect of the game. Not to mention designs that have removed that aspect of the game. So you are literally going against what the game stands for in order to make money. That to me is what I consider predatory, because you are literally no longer supporting what you are supposed to be supporting or offering. With Lotro, I think even though I'm one of those players who I spent very little in Lotro, but I have played quite a couple hundred hours in it. Because where I was at the point, I played a lot, but my wife couldn't play a lot, so I didn't see the point in subscribing because we only ever grouped together. But the nice thing was is that I like to play tanks, but I think it was the Guardian. I think is his name.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't doing it for me. It seemed too easy. Everyone told me, "Oh, you're going to want the Warden." So instead of paying that money on a game that me and my wife knew we weren't going to stick with for the long term, I instead ran around the world and I did all these achievements to earn the cash money to unlock the Warden for myself. Now, that still gave me a sense of like, I earned this son bitch, but it gave me the option to see that side of the game where normally I wouldn't have been able to see it, and it kept me in the game even after my wife was like, I can't play enough. I'm done with this. So it still retained me to the point where I was very strongly considering doing a subscription because I had met a couple people and I was considering joining their guild. And if I had done so, I would likely still be playing, pending guild drama. I'd still be playing it today with a subscription fee. So even though there are a lot of things that piss me off about their cash up, like they do these small little instances, I forget what they're called.
Skirmishes,
yeah, expeditions or something. I love doing those because it was like 20 minutes tops, and I was a warden. I could heal myself. I could do all this stuff. I could do them by myself. And then all of a sudden you do like you do it twice, and then you're like, okay, I want to do a higher difficulty. You're like, nope, sorry, you got to pay us $5. I'm like, okay, I get it, but
yeah, there are a lot of. So here's an example. Because I'm VIP, playing with my brother over the last 4 or 5 months now. Because we always play every winter we play together. This is the first time he never did free to play. He just did it for the experiment this time with me. He did the free to play version. You can't use fast travel for a lot of the horses, a lot of the destinations. You can't use fast travel unless you're a VIP subscriber, or if you have previously played that character as a VIP. And this was a brand new character, so he was like,
so your game is designing a function in to make it less fun, so you can make money. That's predatory.
There are aspects of it that nobody likes, and that's one of them where from his perspective it was very frustrating, and because I would be able to literally get on my mount, fast travel from Rivendell to Bree, and I'd just go make a tea or go take a pee break or something, because it would take him 5 minutes, because he would have to port. He'd be able to self-port to like Oscaroth and then slow travel to the Forsaken Inn and then slow travel from the Forsaken Inn. So it would take him 5 minutes to get somewhere where I could get in 30 seconds because I had a VIP subscription. And now
I'm never gonna tell somebody how to spend their money, but it's just one of those things where for me, that's the definition of pay to win. So
yes, it is.
I'm like,
which is
so
also
you still have to make your money, but for me, I'm just gonna go no go. I'm not playing that game.
sure.
That's just how I feel personally. Same with ESO and their
because of things like that. I don't even think there's a metric for how many people did you lose because of this. There's no way to track that. But I can guarantee you that they lost people because of that. And because there's no metric, they can't consider it. So it will always be there.
Well, there are some metrics, not those metrics in specifics, but I can say that having looked at a bunch of spreadsheets at some different companies through getting access to those with being involved in Saga Leucemia, I've had a look at some of the data behind the scenes, and there is data on the percentage of people who will, like, if you're looking at people who subscribe forever, oh, no worries. If you look at people who subscribe for the entirety of the life of the game, like there are people who are still subscribing to Everquest to this day. Like they're the hardcore.
Yeah.
It's a very small percentage, and then it's a slightly larger percentage of players who will pay to play, and they'll come back and they'll play reliably for 3 to 6 months out of the year. Then there's another percentage of players, which is slightly larger, which is the people who will play about 3 months out of the year. And then there's the amount of people who will buy the game, play the game, and never come back to it. And that's it's actually surprisingly a very big number in
Oh yeah.
comparison to the other ones. So even though it's not specifically referencing how many people quit the game because of that one mechanic, it is a number that shows you there is a very large percentage of people who buy the game, play it, and for some reason or another walk away and never ever come back, even if it's free to
Right.
play.
There's
And
just there's
it's
just no
just
way
there's
to narrow
reasons.
down what the actual issue is
Right.
without talking to each individual person, and that's not a feasible
No.
method to figure out what's wrong.
So you're not incorrect. I was just that sparked that thing in my mind of going,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean there is data, but not that niche of data. Like we don't have that
Right.
specific information. It would be great if we did, but I mean they try to do that. Like I think it's EverQuest, baby. I think EverQuest is the only game I can think of that like because I've subscribed to that game a bunch of times over the years, and every time you quit, there's an exit poll, and you don't have to answer the questions, but I always do because I'm like, I got other shit to do. I played it for 3 months. Another game came out. I want to go play this other game, and I always fill it out. But I would say most people probably don't. They're like, fuck this. I don't want to fill out your stupid form. But I mean, yeah, most people, you're not getting that kind of data.
No.
Um, Loot boxes, I know that came up, and I know you want to talk about that, Jesse. So I would say, since you started that conversation, let's dive off the deep end with that. You're muted, by the way.
You're muted.
Sorry, with loot boxes, I you can have all sorts of different kinds of monetization, but when you go with all the avenues, like you got subscription model, you got battle passes, you got free to play model, and then you throw in a loot box. So you're just trying to get money from
Every corner.
every aspect. That is a little weird to me, and it should be something where it's gambling. Loot boxes are gambling. You don't know what you're going to get. It's a
It's
toss up.
basically a slot machine in a game.
So I think that, and you're doing the same thing. I mean, you might even be selling to underage kids. We don't even know. So I think there should be mechanics to regulate that as a gambling ring or
Well,
the like. If you're going to have loot boxes in your game, it's just not for me. I can't get behind it.
they are
But
doing that at the government level in some countries. Not every
mhm,
country,
Mhm.
but you're not alone in that mentality.
yeah, 'cause it's just like gambling, just same thing,
It is.
slot machine.
I don't.
So
That's
I mean,
why, because I know I have an addictive personality, I know I stay away from that stuff.
It's never.
Not
I've never felt compelled. Like there are loot boxes in Lotro. I literally just delete them when they come into my inventory because it's like, here's this cool loot box. You need a key to open it. In order to buy a key, you have to spend Lotro points, and they're constantly running discounts on the Lotro points. And it's like when you open this, you're gonna get a chance at. It's a chance. You're gonna get a chance at cool armor, or you're gonna get a chance at XP potions, or a chance at. No,
mhm.
I don't. I
stuff that
just
either doesn't matter or breaks the game, basically.
the most annoying I ever saw, I played or I tried to play Neverwinter on the PS4, and oh my god, when I play, and it's been a couple years, maybe they've changed it, I don't know, but when I played on the PS4, I'm playing the free to play, you can download it, and there's this big box that you cannot get rid of. You cannot minimize, you cannot make it opaque. It's just a big box with a constant wall of text. So and so opened this box and got this. I don't fucking care. I want to play Dungeons and Dragons. I want to immerse myself in this fantasy world, and I'm constantly being taken out of that immersion because there's the big freaking window that takes up like a quarter of my screen that's constantly telling me, so and so opened this box. You should subscribe or
You know
you
what's
should buy
funny though?
boxes.
You play any Korean
Blech!
or Eastern garbage MMO, which is like 99.9% of them, and every one of them has that. Every single one.
No,
Or
but
stupid things like every time you log in, boom, you spin the wheel. Look, garbage. You know, there's I usually give Eastern MMOs a really hard time because the gameplay may be fun, the graphics may be amazing, but in the end, the UI, which is directly responsible for your player's experience, is
creating
utter trash.
problems.
I'm
Yeah,
talking like you can have a monkey smear feces on the screen and it would look better. It's terrible because there's so much crap going on that you can't even concentrate on the game. I mean, oh god, I can't remember what the name of it was. There was one of these really crazy martial arts ones, and this was at a
Dynasty.
time. Maybe it was. It came out during a time where I was like really into watching Jackie Chan and Jet Li movies and stuff. So I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, get in there. And I literally I could not watch what my character's doing. You had to actively block, which was one of the things that actually brought me to the game. I couldn't pay attention because I had so much stuff flashing and glittering and scrolling. I was just like,
Sensory overload. Yep,
Mm.
that's definitely a thing, man. It's fatigue.
With
it's well, I don't want to
It's
use
bad
that
design.
word because it's not politically correct, but it is. It is not good.
Mhm.
I don't think you have to worry about being politically correct here, by the way.
Yeah.
I've dropped enough
Oh,
f
the
bombs
last
for all of us
podcast
today.
where I said it, I got some messages about. So
Um,
So, let me ask you guys a question. Do you think subscription models can work? Because
yeah,
I see them working every now and then, but not lately. And everything that's been
no.
successful lately, like Albion Online, they started subscription, but they had to move it. They had to move that goalpost to free to play.
with with subscription, you just have to really take a look at what your product is. If
Mhm.
you have a game like EverQuest where you have to spend 4 to 5 hours to actually accomplish something, like if you want to level, you're talking like 4 to 8 hours worth of just grinding.
Mhm.
Now,
Do we have subscription fatigue right now though?
it's
Subscription
quite
for this,
possible that we
subscription
do,
for this,
Yes.
subscription for
and
that.
you
I'm not.
can.
It's a lot of people are like, I'm not doing it.
I I
I'll
I
pay
don't do it.
for some item or some convenience, but I'm not doing.
I won't do it. I
Mhm.
mean, there's a lot of games out there that I'm really excited about that are
Mhm.
subscription. I won't do it. I mean,
I
why? Because I'm already paying for Netflix and Hulu. To me, that's me and my wife's MMO sub right there.
sure.
Mhm.
So until a game can come along that we can both enjoy
Hmm.
at a relatively similar level, with our schedules being a little weird, and I know this is damn near impossible, there is no way that I will either stack on top of what existing subscriptions I have or remove what I have in order to do those. So, like with MMOs, I think subscription is probably one of the better models for the studio. But with the state of the industry, it's not, because not only do you have to compete against every other MMO, now you're competing against streaming services, you're competing against like cloud storage, everything. You just opened up your opposition to an unfathomable amount, and you have to really just get your shit together and figure out what works for you and not just what works for everybody else or what has the most potential to give you money.
So I have some insight that I can give into this, and I'm going to be tapping into more Saga Leukemia stuff um, from the industry side. Um, it is just a simple fact that if you do a subscription-based model, you are going to marginalize. You're going to have a very small base of players compared to what you could have if you did free to play or some type of hybrid option. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing if, and this is a very big if that you're sure that you can hit a certain benchmark of numbers to make enough money to A, keep the lights on, and B, keep content being produced for your game. Those are two very big caveats, though. Making enough money to keep the lights on and making enough money so that it's not just in maintenance mode, that you're actually producing new content. So you need two teams of people. You need your live service team and you need your expansion team, your content creation team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the problem with being a niche game, the potential problem, is that you need to have enough subscribers to make those two things happen. Now those numbers, depending on what, and this is where things get wild. A lot of this is going to depend on how much people need to get paid for their time. And the reality is that most people are going to want salaries in the ballpark of say $80,000 to $100,000 a year. I'm just going to ballpark it at $100,000 a year. That's what an engineer, whether they're indie or not, let's just ballpark it. Because on the AAA side, you're going to get $150,000, and on the indie side, you're looking at maybe 80 grand. So let's just say it's $100,000 a year. If you've got a team of 6 people doing the live service, you need $600,000 a year. Now you need a team of another 6 to 12 or whatever. There are lots of, I think there are plenty of examples of small indie teams that have 15 to 20 people on staff that are working. So if you figure 15 people at a million, that's $1.5 million a year that you need just for salary. Then there's legal and logistics and taxes and insurance. Do you have rent? Do you have lease? All this other stuff. So put that up around $2 million a year. So if you need $2 million a year just to keep the lights on, forget profit for a minute. You need $2 million a year. What does that come out to? And that's that depends on so many factors. Like if you know that you need $2 million a year to keep the lights on, then you really need to be making 2.5 so that you've got bankroll if there are slow months. And we all know, I mean, especially if you listen to, I forget his name, the guy who runs Final Fantasy 14. He's talked about this a lot in his public interviews. He doesn't care about how long people play his game. He's like, people are going to dip in, they're going to dip out. They're going to dip in and they're going to dip out. They're going to play your game for 3 months. Expansion comes out, they're going to play hardcore for 3 months, then they're going to unsub and they're going to go play World of Warcraft, then they're going to go play ESO or whatever. That's just the nature of the games. They have a big enough population that it doesn't affect them because they have
Right.
millions of people playing their game. But what happens when you're a small indie studio? How do you get to that 2.5 million a year number? If you're
Right.
only charging $8 a month for your subscription, you've got to have a lot more players than the company who's charging $15 a month to play their
Right.
game. But now you have people looking at it going, why the fuck would I play your shitty indie game for $15 a month when I can go play World of Warcraft, which is a polished AAA experience, for $8 a month? Or I can go play PS Plus for $8 a month. I'm giving
Right.
examples here just for the
Right.
sake of
And
being.
and to put it into perspective, if you were charging $15 a month and you're like, say you're an indie studio, you need 11.2 thousand active subscriptions, which don't get me wrong, I mean, most of these really big games have that in spades.
So this
But
goes back to what I was saying earlier when Scribbles had to duck out for a minute. Remember how I said like there's a certain percentage that'll always pay to play your game. Then there's a certain percentage who will play your game for about 6 months out of the year, another percentage that'll play for 3 months out of the year, and then that really big percentage of people who will buy it, play it, never come back. So if you want to maintain that 11.2, I think is what you said. So let's say you need 12,000, 11, 12,000. If you want to maintain 12,000 active players on a monthly basis to hit your goals of 2.5 million, remember that's a small percentage out of the big percentage of people who buy it and never play and never come back. So you actually have to have, conservatively, let's say you need 100,000 people who have bought your game to to have 12,000 people, and I'm throwing some numbers out of my ass right now. Those aren't, don't count those as statistics, please, everybody. I'm just saying those numbers. But as an example, you would need, say, 100,000 players buying your game to get to that 12,000 who are willing to pay the subscription on a monthly basis to keep you in enough subscriptions every month to hit that 2.5 million.
and that's
That's a
assuming you can keep.
hard. Yeah. Shrine of the Avatar sold more than 100,000 copies, and they
Mhm.
bombed
Yeah,
because they
and
couldn't
that's
retain
that's not taking
players.
into account initial cost of any game. That's just maintenance.
Yes. Yeah, that you're right. That doesn't even include the 12 to 15 million that it costs to develop it up front because you have to recoup those costs. So, but we're talking maintenance only. You
just to
need,
just to keep the thing online.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you get to those numbers? That's the tricky thing because you either have an, because here's the other question that came up. I remember this got asked one time on the forums or something. People are like, why the hell would I pay $15 a month for your indie game that only has a launch amount of content when I can play World of Warcraft or EverQuest 2 or Lord of the Rings Online, or you pick it. Pick a MMO that's been out for more than 4 years and they've launched an expansion or two. So we're talking games that already have 2, 3 expansions, 10 or 15 expansions. Why would I play your game for $15 a month when I can play one of those games for $15 a month or less, and I get an infinite amount of content beyond what you have available with your launch product? These are questions that developers have to ask themselves when they're trying to determine how are we going to monetize our own game? Because again, forget about the players for a minute, because if you have a good game, people will be happy to pay for it regardless of what system that you use. It's just what makes sense for you and your company, and how can you hit the numbers that you know you need to hit
And you can
to
sleep
keep the
at night.
lights and to
Right.
sleep at night and keep the game running.
Right. Because I mean, okay, I like to harp on management for MMOs a lot,
And you should.
just because they're people who don't play games running it like just a standard business when there's more to it. There's a lot more heart behind a gaming studio than say your typical manufacturing or just consumer goods company. But they don't realize that. But the thing is, there is a little bit of extra stress on those people because you're in an industry that you don't necessarily understand. That's their fault. But you still have, let's say you have a good relationship with your staff, you will feel directly responsible for their well being. This certainly not something that Blizzard would have to deal with, but like an indie studio or a AAA studio that actually has some morals, they care about their employees. They legitimately care enough that, like, we want to keep these guys employed, fed, and happy. But when you think about it, you add that, you know, everyone needs a raise every couple of years or whatever. That's more money that piles up. The cost of a subscription has never changed in 20 years.
Yeah, that's a
You know, so the fact that we're seeing a lot of things like cash shops, it was an inevitability. Look at Guild Wars 2. It's a buy to play. You buy it, you own it, you play it.
but they still have servers, so how are they going to recoup that cost? You know what I mean?
Right. The fact that it was going to become a horribly, horribly pay to win game was blatantly obvious on day one. I mean, don't get me wrong. I absolutely loved Guild Wars 1. I enjoyed Guild Wars 2 for about 3 months.
That's about all I got out of it too. Is about 3 months.
Yeah. But then they started making the changes of, like, you saw what was coming. And the big problem that you're seeing with a lot of studios now is that they're saying things like, oh, we'll never go pay to win. We'll never do a cash shop. But then once they have your money and things have progressed past launch, they're like, oh, we're adding a cash shop. Yeah, we're adding experience potions. Yeah, we're adding this little item that you can buy that turns you into something or other that now you're almost invincible unless someone else has the exact same thing. So there's nothing you can do to stop that. And a part of me wants to blame them on a moral point, because that's usually the basis of a lot of my arguments with the gaming industry is it's all based on morals. Your morals are shot. And from a business standpoint, I understand it completely. I really do. But the fact of the matter comes down to that games aren't just about, or at least they weren't just about money.
They didn't used to be. I'm gonna Google this real quick because I know it came up recently. Robert A. Kotick, Chief Executive Officer at Activision Blizzard, made $30 million in total compensation. This was from
I can tell you that dirtbag isn't even worth 30 grand a year.
So this is 2019. I haven't looked at the one for 2020. So I'm not even gonna look at the one for 2020 for a minute. Let's just for a second, because I know this comes up a lot in conversations about monetization for games. When you have an individual who's making that amount of money, to me is a
Enough to keep 15 games online.
right. That's a ludicrous amount of money in my mind when you're looking at an indie studio who only needs 2.5 to $3 million a year to maintain a game, and you have a single individual being paid 30, 40, 50 million dollars a year. And obviously it's a big company with thousands of employees and investors, and it is a different ballpark, but at the same time, does it need to be
No.
that way?
And
I
it
think
would
that's
also be different if they actually cared about their employees.
correct, because you've got all these horror stories of people working for 40 or $50,000 a year and being overworked, underpaid, crunch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera in the industry, all because these big companies want to monetize every last little aspect of every last little thing to drain every last little penny. And there comes a point when it's like, what is the and maybe this is, I don't know if this is a part of this conversation or a greater conversation, but where is the line that we draw in the sand that says it's okay to make money? That's why we're working. Everybody wants to make a profit and not just work for the bare minimum. They want to be able to make extra money for their time. That's why a lot of, for those of us who are entrepreneurs, not just those of us here, but people who are out there in the real world who are entrepreneurs, everybody understands when you become an entrepreneur, when you make that transition from, I'm going to use a derogatory term here, and it's going to make some people uncomfortable, but when you go from being a wage monkey to an entrepreneur, you're no longer just punching the clock to get those 40 hours in. You're actually trying to achieve something with your time and get more than those minimum of 40 hours a week. When you do that, there's nothing wrong with wanting to make profit.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's capitalism at its best. But where is that line that we draw that says the things that we're doing are predatory and or and this is a difficult thing because some people say, well, there's no such thing as morality when it comes to earning money, and it's like, well, maybe there should
That's
be.
bullshit. That is
Hey,
straight up bullshit.
I challenge every gamer to vote with their wallet.
Yes,
If
absolutely.
if you see something that doesn't mesh with your morality or you don't think it's right, just don't pay for it.
They-
That's the only way that keeps everybody honest. It's the only
Now,
way that keeps these developers honest is just because just do the
yeah,
right thing. Yeah.
in the end,
Vote with
where
your
the
wallet.
industry is at, is
I
our
wish
fault.
gamers would do that.
It is all our fault. I remember watching a bunch of people lined up outside of Best Buy, middle of the night, freezing cold for like, I think it was like Call of Duty Black Ops 2. And my thought was, you are the stupidest people on earth because the game has barely changed in like the last 8 years. They've added like one or two little things. Most of it's online stuff that makes you buy stuff anyway. And I think it was Call of Duty where it's like I remember watching a stream where they were like, you can now spend $25 to get this oak butt stock on your gun, and I'm like, oh really? That's not a horrible freaking method. You know, you're not greedy at all.
I played
But
Warzone with my uncle and cousins last year for a few months,
Mhm.
and I refused to buy the battle pass or anything, and I'm on the stream with them, and they're constantly doing that right there. Not only do they pay for the battle pass, but they're like, "Oh, I want that custom," and it's like $15 for this custom wood stock. Oh my god.
right. But see, when it comes to like, when we talk about business, how there's like no morality when it comes to business, that's bullshit. It's just a cop out to give them an excuse to do whatever they want to do. I'm an entrepreneur. I've owned multiple businesses. I used to buy and sell businesses. I'd buy them, build them up, and sell them again. You know, and yes, you need profit. You need profit to expand your dealings when you're an entrepreneur. I couldn't go from buying, you know, a hardware store to buying a fucking restaurant to buying a hotel unless you make profit. There's no way, literally no way to do it because you have to make profit there. But the problem is, like, we'll take Activision Blizzard. The guy's making $30 million a year. You know, without even trying to think about it, that the man's obviously living however the hell he wants.
Yes.
He's
And
probably got a car that costs, shit you not, $30,000 for an oil change.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
No,
I,
because I know a guy that works for God, where was I? I think he works for BMW, and there's a car that has a $28,000 price tag just to change the brake pads.
side note,
Okay,
I was just googling this. So he just actually got a $200 million payout this year because there was a bunch of bonuses tied to his stock options based on how many people played games and so on and so forth. And because of COVID last year, so many more people were playing games than previous years that he hit all those benchmarks. And so he got a $200 million payout. Now,
right.
that blows my mind when we're talking about indie games that can be developed for, looking back at Valheim, you got 5 guys over the course of 3 years. That's not $1 million game. That's well, yes, it is, but it's not a $10 million game. It's not one of those things. But I'm looking at that going, you could fund 20 games for those bonuses comfortably.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, because like here's the thing. Like I had a big argument about these AAA studios because I think every single one of them is trash. Because a lot of people bring the argument, well, they need the money to expand. I'm like, yes, you need money to expand, but show me the last time one of these AAA MMO studios expanded.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't seen a large expansion in at least 10 to 15 years. So that's shot out the window. Show me another reason why they should be making this money. When they make games that just look good, they're all glitter, no guts, which means they put all the money into making it look good to entice you to play it, and they just don't care about the game itself. And they're going to bleed you dry as fast as they can so that when you do eventually leave, it doesn't matter, which is the strategy of Blizzard, They Break Games, EA, all of them. That's their strategy because they're big business. They have a very efficient conveyor belt of bleeding their players dry.
So the Call of Duty mobile studio is called Timmy Studio. It looks like TIMI Studio, and Tencent purchased them last year. This was April 4th. So this was 2 days ago that this news article came up to me in my feed on Tech Times. So this studio made $10 billion. Hey, think about that number for a minute. $10 billion last year. And I don't know, I'm skimming the article. I don't know if all of that money is from Call of Duty Mobile. It looks like it is, according to this article, just a quick skim. $10 billion is what that studio brought in. And again, I don't know because I'm not digging into that. I don't know if it's all from the Call of Duty mobile game, but that's a mobile-based company. Think about that for a minute because mobile games are free-to-play titles that exist purely upon cash shop purchases. $10 billion.
More money than some countries.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
from a mobile game.
Yeah.
So this, spinning this background to monetization. As an indie, as indie individuals ourselves, as indie developers, I think it's pretty safe to say that those kind of numbers are, unrealistic to think about for the types of products and projects that we produce. But there still has to be that important question going on in the background of how are we going to make enough money to fund this unless we're all working for free and bootstrapping it. But here's the thing, bootstrapping only works until you launch. Because once you launch, you have a commitment to your customers to keep the lights on and to provide them with whatever it is that they paid for. So you have to figure out what is going to be the monetization option that works best for you and provides the type of players that you want to get into your game with a system that they feel is fair and worthy of giving you money for. That's a tricky thing because
it's from the other side of the fence, from the business side, not the consumer side. We're stuck in a really weird rut. You're either making more money than Jesus, or you're basically eating ramen noodles every other day trying to get by.
Yeah.
There's no happy medium.
Does Valheim
anymore.
have microtransactions as an FYI, or is it just buy once and you play it?
Buy it and go.
So that I would like to theorize that maybe one of the reasons that it has sold so many copies is not just based on the fact that it was a reasonably smooth playing experience. It didn't have a lot of bugs, but possibly also because it was a buy it, get it, play it, and people are like, fuck yeah, I don't have to get nickel and dime for every last little thing. I could just pay $20 and play a game. Because
Right.
I was really surprised when I bought Jedi Fallen Order last year because that was touted as like it was the first EA game in a very long time that wasn't going to have microtransactions. And I know a lot of people were very skeptical, like surely that can't be true. It's EA. They always, but it did launch
They'll
and
always screw you in the end.
it did launch and it did very, very, very well. It did well enough that they said the next Dragon Age game is no longer going to include multiplayer or any sort of online component. They're going back to the single player version of how it used to be produced. And I was like,
Right.
yay.
Yeah.
Because I for one, Jesse, you asked a question earlier about is it subscription fatigue? I think for sure it's subscription fatigue because we have so many things we could subscribe to. and also so many games that I can play. And I'm a big fan right now of like I don't really care who I buy the game from. I don't give a shit if it's GOG, Steam, Epic. I don't care. I'm not a person who cares about the politics of a company, excuse me. If I see a game that looks fun and I think I'm going to get enjoyment out of it, I'll buy it. And I think my brother is in the same boat and he also likes the Switch. He has a Nintendo Switch and he's a big fan of like all these indie titles that come to the Switch or they're doing ports of old games to the Switch. But I just like this. I like living in the golden age of game development where I can literally, whether it's GOG, Steam, Epic Store Launcher, whatever, I get a game for free every week through Epic. I get free games through Steam pretty much every month. I get free games from PlayStation every single month. Some of these things I subscribe to, others I don't. I'm getting like anywhere from 5 to 10 games for free every single month, not to mention the just plethora of free to play games that I can go download at a moment's notice off of any website, platform, Google Play, whatever, PlayStation. It doesn't matter. Free, 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 free. It is a really hard sell to me why I should subscribe to your game.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Why should I? Like, I think Leksur had a very good argument of if my wife played games, I guarantee you I would be subscribed to other things. But she doesn't play games, which is actually good for me and my wallet because my previous relationship many years ago, I gamed with my ex-partner and for like 8 years, and we were running anywhere from 6 to 8 subscriptions a month because of all the different games we played, and we were playing all the time. Um, and if she played, I have no doubt because she did play with me briefly. She played World of Warcraft Classic with me. It was her first like dive into playing an or any sort of video game ever was Warcraft retail for a few weeks, and then she dived into Classic with me. And so I was happy to pay those 2 subscriptions because she was playing with me. But as an individual, and this is weird for me to say because I harped so long on, Cycle of the CB is going to be a subscription-based game. But I always knew from the very beginning that I think even all the way back in 2016, I was already talking about a hybrid version and going, you can't just be subscription. It's not possible in the current era. You have to offer people options. Like there has to be something out there because I don't think you can survive on boxes and subscriptions alone. I really don't think you can unless you have a player base that's like Final Fantasy 14 that is so big that you can afford to deal with that wave of people coming in and out. But even Final Fantasy 14 has microtransactions. They're cosmetic, but they still have them. What company? I don't think there's a single game out there. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anybody who's watching this show, by the way, correct me if I'm wrong. I can't think of or I don't know of a single game in
The comments
2000
below.
yeah, please leave your comments below. In 2021, I can't think of a single game that relies on a subscription and only a subscription to make money. I can think of lots of hybrid games that have a subscription plus a cosmetic cash store, but I can't think of any that only have a subscription. And I think there's reasons for that. By the way, I won't pay for CBS just to get access to Star Trek Discovery because it comes to Netflix a week later or whatever, and I'm happy to just wait for it to come to Netflix. And I'm also not going to lie
Right.
and
I'm kind of taking bets with some friends on how long it's going to be until these like sub branch streaming services all implode.
well, I can also say this too because I live outside of the United States, so there are workarounds because you can't get a Hulu subscription unless you're in the United States, unless you have a VPN, and there are other ways to get around that as well. And I'm not going to go into those ways in this stream, but let's just say that I don't want for entertainment options, and people will find ways to get around stupidity in terms of you have to be here to be able to watch it or you have to do this like wasn't
Well,
it
remember when Arcade became the big thing
yeah
before Triumph picked it up? It was over in Korea, and you actually had to have a Korean social security number to play it. I
didn't
still
know
played
that.
it, and you had to install these English font packs, and I mean, and then you still had to do a VPN over there. I mean, doesn't matter how crazy you get, there's going to be ways around it, which is kind of like it's like why even spend all the time with these restrictions? Because in the end, anything you do on a computer can be undone.
Yes. Didn't you
Just
ask me the other
accept.
day, Jesse, about or was it you, Lex? I don't remember. One of you asked me about Outriders and
Yeah,
why it
single
was,
player online.
yeah, why it was that a single player game had to be played online. I was like, well, I mean, there's
Because it's the best way to track your users.
that's exactly what I wrote. I think in
But
my reply, I was like, well, it's all about tracking user data. It's about getting that information, which is the most important aspect of it. But this
well,
goes
that's
back to
fine. That's fine, but just don't let them have another option to play it without you tracking the. I don't know if they need another another item in the game, you can make it like a patch so they can
Right.
track it that day.
It's also one of the most effective ways of anti-piracy.
yes, anti-piracy was the other thing I was going to bring up, but I did want to mention that because in terms of monetization, user data is the most easily monetized thing that you can have as a company, which is why, I remember I think there was a talk at a conference I went to. Can't remember who it was. I swear it was the guys from Epic. It was before they launched the Epic launcher. They were talking about Fortnite, I think, and why they didn't have Fortnite on Steam. And I could be wrong on this, but I could swear it was the guys from Epic talking about why they didn't put Fortnite on Steam. And the reason why, given at the conference, was because when you put something on Steam, Steam keeps all the customer data. So you don't get the email, you don't get the phone number, you don't get any of the customer information. And I'm not talking credit cards because that's not information you should ever have as a company. You should be using a third-party system and etc. But when we're talking user information, we're talking email address, mailing address, and phone number. And there's going to be some people who listen to me saying this right now and be like, "That's so corrupt. I can't believe you're." But that's the reality from a company perspective. The most valuable thing you have is your user data.
Mhm.
And so there is a reason for that kind of stuff because that stuff can be monetized. It might not necessarily be through
I can
microtransactions, but
I can tell you right now that there is not a single thing on your computer that doesn't sell your data. And these people are like, oh, Discord doesn't. No, Discord does it too.
everybody sells your data.
They comb your messages because I have definitive proof because I have a friend of mine who sent me like 20, 30 pictures trying to decide between like two articles of clothing where I'm obviously not the guy to talk to about that stuff. And I was like, whatever. I just kind of humored him. And then I shit you not. The next day I went to Amazon to look something up, and the shirt that I told him to get was up in my recommended items. And I do not get clothes on Amazon. So I'm like, Discord, you dirty sons of bitches.
I've had some interesting. The girls I work with at Hidden Compass, we had a conversation one time. We were chatting about ancient. There's this Facebook page called Ancient Origins, I think, and for the most part, it's mostly conspiracy theories about aliens. But every once in a while, they have some really good archaeology articles in there. Neither one of them had ever even heard of that page. Think about this for a minute. Neither one of them had ever heard about the page, knew anything about it, had never looked at anything else. The next day, both of them got in their Facebook feed recommended articles from that website after we had a conversation we had a video chat about it, and it was one of those funny. It can't be a coincidence, not to be a conspiracy theorist, but data is getting out there one way or another, and that's the
Yeah.
most easily monetized component of things. So that's why even from a company perspective, let's say you're collecting email addresses and you don't have a cash shop, you don't have a product or anything else, you still have a monetizable audience because you have all their email. And here's the fun thing that you're not allowed to do this anymore, but let me take you back to about 2013, 2012, 2013. You used to be able to take, and I used to do this, I made a lot of money doing this back in my early days. So you used to be able to, in the early days of the Facebook advertising system, you could take someone's unique username or unique user ID on Facebook and plug it in to a spreadsheet, which you could feed into the Facebook system, and then it would directly target those people for ads. So what I would do is I would go fishing. And I didn't use an algorithm. I did it manually. My assistant and I and my wife, we would go and we would literally go into these Facebook groups of like travel bloggers, and there'd be 7, 8, 9,000, and we'd spend a month, and we would go through there and we would pull every single individual's unique username, unique user identity from Facebook, plug it into a spreadsheet, and then I would run these ads to sell these books on how to make a living traveling the world and working online as a writer, photographer, etc. And I could run ads for $200 a month. And we started at $200 a month and scaled it up because for $200 a month of ad spend, I was making $3,000 a month in book sales. And then I just scaled it up from there and just got to the point where I was spending about $1,000 a month and just that was about the cap off point before I noticed that there was a fall off. And you could only do that for so long because eventually all the people in that group would buy the book. And so then you have to go on to the next group. And so it was a constant dance of feeding new information in, which is why it's so many companies like to go buy data. They'll buy a newsletter list with 20,000 users on it because that user list can be plugged into a spreadsheet somewhere for an ad system that targets those people based on likes, dislikes, all this other stuff. It might sound nefarious, but it's the reality of the world we live in. So
Hmm.
if you're going to be online in any capacity, you have to realize that every single company in the world is doing this kind of stuff. It doesn't matter if they've got a form on their website that says, we promise that GDPR, we
They do it
promise
anyway.
that the information gets out anyway, whether it's the company or PayPal or the third party service provider or Discord or Facebook or whatever. Data gets out there and that can be monetized, which is the, and I'm going to use air quotes here, that's the predatory nature um, of
Of the world we live in.
of the world we
Technology.
live in and technology, correct?
I
And
mean,
I know
okay,
I know
so
I kind of went off on a tangent there that's not
no,
directly
I mean
related to
it's
games,
still
but
valid because it is the time we live in. Like I'm an IT guy. I've been in IT for 20 years, but I don't believe in the Internet of Things. You know, where you can control your TV, your lights, your front door, your fridge, all from your phone. I don't believe in any of that because the thing is, every little bit of information, every time you click something, every time whatever you do, it gets reported somewhere. And while I don't believe I'm that interesting of a person that people really want to see this information, I don't believe they have a right to make money off of what I do. So I don't support it. And it's the same thing with a lot of games. Like I don't even sign up to newsletters. I don't sign up to a lot of betas anymore. There was a time where I signed up to every single beta
mm,
that I could ever find.
I remember those days. Yeah.
I wrote a bot that would literally go comb the internet for games looking for beta signups and then automatically sign me up. So I would get like alpha, beta keys all the time, not even know what the hell it was for.
Just be like, this looks fun. I'll try it
Yeah,
out when it comes
it would
available.
literally come in for my. It would literally come. Oh, you just been accepted to bloody blah blah. I'm like, oh, let's go check it out. What is this?
Now we're overloaded with games. It's never happening now.
Yeah, I turned that bot off 5 years ago
Mhm.
because I was getting beta invites to games where I'm like, no, absolutely not. And then out of like I can't remember which company it was, but I did an experiment because I noticed that my spam folder was ramping up very quickly. So I made a new email account and I went to one game company, a larger one. I just don't remember which one it was, and I signed up for a newsletter. Within 6 months, I was getting, I think, 6 pieces of spam every day.
Hmm.
And it was the only single place I ever put that email address. And it just kept getting more and more and more because they get a list, they use it, they sell it to someone else who uses it and sells it to somebody else. I know a guy that owns a retail store and he literally buys email lists
Well,
and he sells them too.
there's also it's not just about email lists. And I promise I'm going to spin this back around to because I wanted to ask a question about Defend the Night here in a minute. Um, I did a big project for a travel conglomerate called the Adventure Collection 3 or 4 years, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago now. And I remember at one point we had a big marketing meeting, and I'm not breaking NDAs by talking about this because I'm speaking very generically, but I can say that at a certain level, when you're talking about getting into the millions of dollars a year expenditures, it it's not just about emails. One of my favorite was like targeting people based on zip codes. Um, and there are companies out there who specialize in giving you income brackets based on the zip codes that people live in. So you're going to know because there are certain places where only very affluent people live, and the people who live in this area are making a median wage of $350,000 a year. They're both Harvard educated, Stanford educated, Yale, whatever, Ivy League colleges, making $350,000 a year minimum. They have a net value of $2 million. They're going to live in this zip code bracket. And so you purchase that data from these companies, and you can target your marketing campaigns. That's one of many, 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 many ways. And this is not private information. That these companies are out there, you know, that do these services for companies. Um,
I mean, here's how specific it can get. I had to explain to someone how he wanted to buy a Harley. It wasn't Harley Davidson that was sending him mailers, but they were targeting Harley owners.
Enthusiasts. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And what it was is he felt like we both felt, because I showed him the actual like data here. I was like, okay, for density wise, there's a very high density of Harley enthusiasts in this area, and that's what they're targeting. And they're giving it to everyone in the neighborhood, so they can't say that it's just sending it to you. They're targeting just you. It's to everybody.
It's blanketing
And
that.
it was like a company selling like saddlebags or something, like just accessories. And he was like, now how do they know that information? It's like they probably bought it from Harley Davidson. He's like, no, they wouldn't do that to us. It's like, then you are incredibly naive.
Yeah. So
if someone came to you right now and said, I will give you 3 cents for the address, the mailing address of every single client you've ever owned or you've ever had, let's say that equates to something like $400,000.
done.
Would you say no? And he's like, well, of course I'd say yes. There you go.
It's very easy math. You guys don't have a product yet, and I know you've talked about. I think I saw something or had a conversation at some point. Don't you guys have something like you've talked about with your community about some of the ideas that you've had
Oh yeah,
in
we
terms
have
of
community
monetization?
questions all the time. About monetization. No, not so much. We ask them what they think, but not in regards to what we're going to do. Um, what we're going to do is just definitely going to be something fair that I can sleep with that night. Um, that's big for me. I think everybody on the team is the same way. We don't want to create problems that you have to pay to get out of. That's something that we don't want to have happen. But we definitely want to go to a free to play route so we can at least have you in the game. I don't know if that's going to be a trial system or just straight up free to play, but that's definitely something we're working towards.
With my strong feelings and the way the industry has changed, I I would throw a colossal style 5-year-old fit if they did anything that didn't have not only their own um God, I'm English, please help me. Yeah, English. Um, they would have whatever they decide to do, or sorry, whatever we decide to do, it would have to have both our and the player's best interest at heart. Because I've been on both sides. Actually, most of us have been on both sides, and we've both been burned on both sides. We know how it feels. But with our community, like we do also try to do, was it bi-monthly or monthly late night sit downs, and just to hang out with the people of our community.
Something
Right,
that I always go ahead.
Yeah, because we want to get to know them. We don't just want them to be, a random number on the screen. Because we all want them to know that yes, we have to make money here. There's no way around it. If there was a way that we could do it without making any money,
It'd be great.
we would do it.
And
That's
plus
why
we
we're all
know
volunteers.
we know we need a big player base too. So it's an MMORPG, so we know we need a lot of people in there to play. What's the barrier of entry for a person to come in and see what it's all about? So we got to think about that kind of thing too, because we are indie.
Something that
Yes.
worked very well for me, going back to what you just said, Lexer. For a long time, managing the Saga Leucemia community, um, I always did the gaming sessions to keep people occupied in between test sessions. So that was more of a thing back when we were only doing test sessions like every 3 months as opposed to every week.
Mhm.
Because if I've got a 3 month span between tests, then it's like, okay, let's go all play Project 1999 for the next 3 months, and you get 70, 80, 100 people to go over and play. But the nice thing about that was every single time we did that, I would always get customers, because you get people who join the guild because you're an active guild on the server and you're making a noise and you're making a name for yourself, and people are like, well, I want to join that guild because they're doing activities and they're on Discord and they're posting and they're streaming, and all of a sudden then they get in the guild and they're like, wait a second, this is a guild about, you guys are all like part of some community. What's the community? Oh, you guys are building a game. Oh, now I'm going to go pre-order the game and become a community member. That was one of the
Right.
various marketing tools that I used. um,
I I don't want these podcasts to end up being a DTN marketing tool. I really
sure.
don't.
Yeah, right.
But like I can't be that guy who's sitting there condemning these triple A's if I'm not willing to do better. That's
Mhm.
just not the way I do things. And we're building DTN because we love MMO,
Hmm.
because we miss the good old days, but it's also because we miss just meeting good people. And through
Yeah.
making DTN, that's how we're trying to give back by saying we want to get to know you. We want you to go out there and meet new people. We want you to have fun together. It's not it's money is never going to be our number one priority. We have bills to pay.
If it's about the
People like to
community,
eat.
if it's about
I,
the
I
community, the money will come
exactly.
regardless.
And that's what I try to tell people. Where there's been a couple other smaller games that I talk to, and they're like, well, here's my budget, and this is what we have to aim for. I'm like, no, aim for a good game, aim for a good community, do right by your people, and your people will do right by you.
Somebody brought something up in conversations with me recently, maybe a few weeks ago, about empathy. Um, and I think that just ties into the community aspect of it. If you can show that you actually give a shit and you're empathetic with your community members and what they want out of your game and what they want out of the experience that you're going to offer them, that in and of itself will make money without you needing to actually do anything. Which is, this is the irony of looking at the AAA studios. They have to work really hard to get customers. That's why you see World of Warcraft doing these. I haven't done it in a while, but they used to do the Super Bowl commercials, and they do these. Now they do, ESO's doing it now too. They do these huge um, animation short films, basically, that are costing a chunk of change to put together. But that's because they feel like, this is my perspective, of course, but when I watch those videos, it's like, so your game isn't necessarily good enough to get people just because it's a fun game. You have to actually make these elaborate films to market the game. I'm not saying they're bad films. They're cool to watch. But at the same time, it's like, if that cost you $3 million to put together, isn't there another way that you could be getting people to want to play your game? If that makes sense, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like you're talking about a team that has hundreds of people on the staff, and how often do you see any of those people? Like,
Right.
another good example is, like, as much as I like Larian Studios and what they're doing with like Baldur's Gate 3, you only really ever see three or four of those developers. You see Sven, the lead guy, and you see like the lead writer, and you see the leads. That's who you see. What
Right.
about the 500 other fucking people who are working for you? Like, why aren't they
Yeah.
getting a spotlight?
There, there's another game, and I tried to give them the benefit of what business knowledge I have. And I told them, like, you need to personalize yourself. You need people to think that you are their friend. And a lot of people could say that that's dishonest, but it's really not, because in the end, you're making a game for other people to play.
Yes.
But when you only see one person or two people, there's more to it, and we know there's more to it. But you can form a relationship with someone that you watch, like, say, through like just regular sit downs over Twitch or whatever. But when you get to know the whole team, and everyone that they're conversing with, be it like 2, 3, 4, 5 people at a time, and they're all getting along really well, having a good time together on the stream,
That
and you're a
passion,
part of that.
yeah.
Yeah, and you're a part of it. You become, in a way, a part of that team, at least emotionally. At which point, it doesn't matter if there's a big problem. They're more willing to overlook it and understand because they're a part of the team. They sympathize with you. They're they're rooting for you the whole way, rather than just like hiding things from the community and just trying to put on that veneer of we're professionals. It's like that's all fine and well, but in this day and age, there are so many professionals that have literally bent their people over the counter without so much as using KY. And what people want now, they want people that they can believe in.
People want honesty and transparency, especially when it comes to indie development, and people want to know that the games that are being developed by these indie teams are going to have fair monetization policies, and that the money that they're giving these companies, if and this touches briefly on what we talked about last week, if we're talking, you know, uh, crowdfunding or early access or whatever the case may be, there needs to be the transparency there to know that money is being used in the right way, and the knowledge that the company has as much as you might want to make a profit, also making sure that you've got the community's needs and interests at
At heart.
heart and at the forefront of your business policies. Because if they're not, it's very easy to see that it's become this corporate structure. And
Right.
that, I'm not saying that you
Like,
can't have a corporate game. Obviously, corporate games make
no.
tons of money. But, you know,
All right. I mean, let's take, for instance, EA. EA has been the bottom of the barrel shit stain company for a decade at least. They have made strides with Fallen Order, Battlefront 2 to make them more of a less predatory game. The effort is there, but because they're still more concerned about just coming across as a AAA studio and just taking care of business, it's going to take a long time for anyone to really just even give a shit.
or trust them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let alone
I
trust
mean,
them, I should say.
I never played Battlefront 2 until it was free on Epic, and I'm one of the guys who played the original Battlefronts to death.
Yeah, those were great games.
Yeah, like my eyes feel like sandpaper. I should probably step away for a few minutes. Kind of that's the kind of player I was with these.
Worth it. Worth it.
Yeah, so worth it. And I mean, I love the Dragon Age, the original. I wasn't too keen on the second one, or Inquisition or whatever it was. But anyway,
Third one was Inquisition, yeah.
yeah. So I wasn't too keen on those ones so much because you could tell that people in suits that didn't have two clues what was going on were getting their filthy claws in there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I I still think EA is a shit stain company, but at least I can openly say that there is at least evidence that someone in that company is making strides to think about the players again, which
Here's a good
is hopeful.
good question that I'm just thinking about. Do you think there's any correlation, the both of you? We have a lot of indie companies that are selling pre-orders right now, and I don't want this to become a discussion about pre-orders, but the reason I ask this question is because do you think that there's any way that a company can, because we're talking monetization, there's monetization of the game once it's become a live game, and how do you do all that? Do you think there's any correlation with the way that a company does its pre-orders and how that impacts, or does it have any impact on what you think they're going to do once they go live?
I think everything they do does give you a bit of a premonition of what's going to happen. Um, like
Because
take pre-orders of
yeah.
of EverQuest Next, which
Yeah.
is a sore topic
Yeah,
everywhere.
everybody has this, everybody's a little butthurt about that one.
Right. When they first had the pre-orders, it was fine. It was your standard fare of, help us support it. Maybe we can get it out a little faster, even though you're technically a $1 million AAA company. And they were offering you special one-time things. Okay, that makes a lot of sense for that time. Everybody was doing it. But then they start splitting the game up into different pieces, and they start offering different packs for different things. And this side has different packs than this side. It's no longer the same thing. He's like, you knew something was happening. You knew something was not right. And even the indie studios now, they're doing like pre-purchases or founder packs or whatever you want to call them. You have to be very careful of how they are perceived, because perception is going to be probably 9/10 of what's going to change your reputation amongst the player base.
I think the other tricky thing too, though, is because not only COVID. I'm going to use this as a very like blatant example. COVID has changed the way the world operates, and it's changed the way everybody does business, and that's a very specific thing. But I mean, I could think, looking back at like we have no way to predict what the most popular monetization methods of tomorrow are going to look like, because things change so quickly now, and these new games spring up and sell hundreds of millions of copies, and they shift the entire landscape. I mean, Valheim, I think, is a good example of a game that came out of nowhere, and I think it might not necessarily have shifted anything yet, but I do know it's causing players to ask some very hard questions of these independent developers who have been taking 9, 10 years to develop their games with teams of like 15 to 20 people. When you have this team of like 5 guys who, over the course of 3 years, were able to put out this thing. I'm not going to argue the content aspect of it or not. I'm using this as a case study of saying, here's a game. Fortnite did the same thing. When Fortnite came out, it shifted the landscape. It suddenly Battle Royale was the big name, and how that game was being monetized influenced other games. We never know how monetization is going to look next year, let alone in 5 years. I think that a very important aspect of any company who's up and coming and developing is going to be to continue to monitor that. And also games that are running live now, you have to be able to adapt to that system, or adapt your systems to those changes as they go along. That's tricky, man.
It's
really
a business
tricky.
thing. It really is. I mean, you have to look at the landscape, objectively look at the landscape.
Well, because I just was
Not
thinking about
just
that. Earlier we were talking about like EverQuest, how it was designed for a different era, and then it switched to free to play, and the mechanics no longer fit the monetization. But the only way that they could survive as a company was to make that switch.
right.
That's a poopy situation to be in.
It is because being a person who spent a lot of time just in the business world, I was never way up there, but I was a name locally that a lot of people knew, for good or bad. Same with the MMO world, I guess. Um, it comes down to, you have to objectively look at the landscape without without bias. If you can manage it, it's harder to do than it sounds, because you have your heart set on subscriptions, so you're just unconsciously going to look at all the good things that subscriptions can do and all the bad things that free to play does. But if you can look at it objectively, you can kind of see what's coming. So with all subscriptions more or less being played out, with free to play being abused and taken advantage of, with microtransactions becoming increasingly more predatory, it was only a matter of time before a buy to play title came out that was going to drastically just shake everything up. Valheim, where if you look at, if you think that this is what the next step is going to be, then you can take steps ahead of time to shift yourself into that frame of mind. Maybe you have to get away from hosting your own official servers. I think Valheim only has a handful of them, and I don't even know if they're the ones that are maintaining them. But you can still run your own server. Is that an option for MMOs? Well, the way it stands right now, probably not. Unless you can come up with a situation to where it would be a good fit. And it will take some creativity and a lot of hard work, but you could probably figure a way to do it. So maybe that's the next logical step. But knowing that where you are in that timeline really can change your outlook on what you should be doing next.
Hmm.
I do think for me that you should really play a demo of a game at least before you do any pre-ordering of anything. Uh,
Yes,
so that's definitely something that I
and that
behoove everyone to do their
right,
due diligence to before
that's
they pay for a game.
right, and not to fluff Jesse's ego at all, um, but when we all sat down to discuss it for DTN, Jesse said, "You know what? Unless I got something for my people to play, I don't want them giving me a dime." And we all thought about it, like, that makes a lot of sense. It really does, especially in this era. So that's what we decided to do. Money is a very enticing thing, especially when you are a volunteer. Prospect of taking something you love dearly and taking it from a hobby to I'm getting paid for this is something that's very, very hard to, or a very hard temptation to keep at bay.
Hmm.
But that's what we had agreed upon, and that's what we're going to stick to. So you won't see DTN crowdfunding or offering founder packs or however we want to do it until we have something for our people to play, because it is what we decided was the best option for our players.
Yeah, you could look at other games like Amazon's New World. They had a demo. Everybody played the game for many months, even alpha, and I think they might be in beta now. I'm not sure, but I mean, everybody saw what the game was. It was the actual game, and then the pre-order store opened up. Everybody's buying the pre-order store. That's a perfect way to do it.
Yeah.
It's honest,
Even though that game, in
Mhm.
my opinion, is kind of trashy.
But I mean, it's
From a business
honest.
perspective, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all personal taste.
Yeah, they invested all their own money up front.
Mhm.
I can fully appreciate that point of view, but I can also coming at it from the other side of the fence, having sold pre-orders for a very long time with Suckle Seaman, and then, like with what my brother and my wife and I have going on with our Patreon right now, we're very upfront with people, just like I was with Saga. It's like, don't give us money just because. At the bottom, there's this whole section. We all have day jobs. We're the point of people supporting the Patreon is not about the product per se, although people get the product as a side result of subscribing. It's because of you're supporting all the other things that go on, all the behind the scenes access and all this stuff. And that's not for everybody. And not everyone can be trusted. That's a very tricky scenario where you have to be willing to invest, so to
Right.
speak, in something without there being a physical product that you can actually touch just yet. Now, I will say with Saga at the very least, you bought it, you could log in
Right.
right away, and so that's you're not getting to play it first, but you can watch 500 videos of the game being played and make that decision. But
Mhm.
yeah, man, monetization is just so tricky because everybody's got their own personal pressure points of
Mhm.
what
Well, there's just no one's life is exactly the same.
everybody's got.
Everyone's life has
Yeah,
different requirements.
Mexicans, as an example, because I live in Mexico, I can say this about Mexicans. Mexicans do not have the same, there's a different perspective here when it comes to disposable income compared to people in the United States because people here don't make, it's a completely different culture. And
Hmm.
so when you start to ask somebody if they're willing to spend $20 on a product from the United States, I mean, that might be someone's entire salary for like 2 days, 3 days worth of work. And so
Right.
you're asking them to make a pre-order purchase for something that's not even out yet, and that's like 3 days of their wages. That's a big purchase. That's not the same level. And I think a lot of developers don't think about that when they're
Hmm.
considering, when you have a global product. A lot of people like Eastern Europe, Latin America, they don't have the same levels of disposable income. And so the emotional
So you're
component,
missing out on some of those people too as well.
Yeah.
yes,
Instead of giving you $12 a month, maybe in a free to play game they might give you $3 a month.
yes, because it all adds up.
Because yeah, but yeah, you're missing that level of people in those areas. So yeah,
If you purchase yourself out of their bracket. So it's more food for thought on an international scale. And I just realized we've been going for an hour and 45 minutes. So, is there any final thoughts? I don't know how much more we want to dive into the monetization aspect. Um,
It's it's this topic that you can go on forever
mm, we really can.
because even just between three people, we all have radically different values, different strategies. Even though, like, say, me and Jesse might agree that free to play is a good option, it might be for completely different reasons,
Hmm.
or that microtransactions are a bad thing, but for completely different reasons. And it's not to say that one is right or one is wrong. It just it's there's what I think like 30 million people that play MMOs these days,
Hmm.
and every single one of them has a different value than the next. And it's going to be a difficult thing for any studio going forward to figure out where do you get that happy medium of income versus not taking advantage of your people.
I think options is good. Having options, providing options to your players is good, as long as those options don't cross into the territory of being predatory. I think we're all kind of in agreement on that
Right.
Yeah.
part of it. No loot boxes, please, because that crap is just ridiculous. Um, and anything predatory is bad. So, on that note, everybody, I think we're going to wrap
All
this
right, guys.
episode. Make sure you leave your comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on monetization, what you feel are good things, bad things, what games you like, how they monetize their game. It's all good information, and it's great topics of discussion for everybody. So, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, check out the links below. And they're not going to market their game, but I will shout out for them anyway and say you should check out the links to go to Defend the Night. I will push it as often as I can. And of course, all the other links below to all the other things that I work on. Thanks for tuning in. We will see everybody in the next episode.
Bye, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Later.